On April 10th, 1912, thousands of people gathered to Southampton to see the fastest, largest, most luxurious ocean liner ever built take its maiden voyage to New York. Those lucky enough to be aboard the Titanic were taken aback by its elegantly decorated interior as they were by its enormous exterior. During the 5 days the Titanic was at sea, the experience was a dream turned terribly wrong. I will attempt to show you what the experience on the Titanic was like from the moment she was boarded to the hour she sank 5 days later. I will discuss the main features of the Titanic's accommodations and details of the first-class passengers before the Titanic sank, the second and third-class passengers before the Titanic sank, and the crash. Before the ship sank, life aboard the Titanic was the most luxurious available, and each class had a slightly different experience from when she set sail to when she sank. The best accommodations the luxury ocean liner Titanic had to offer were experienced by the first class. First-class passengers got to enjoy Titanic's greatest interior feature of all, the grand staircase. The grand staircase was equipped with carved oak paneling walls as well as a huge iron-framed glass dome overhead. At the center of the staircase was an ornately detailed carving around a clock that showed classical figures that depicted honor and glory crowning time, as said by Don Lynch in Titanic Illustrated. First-class passengers enjoyed an immaculately decorated dining room, as well as 2 veranda cafes on the porch and a French coffee shop themed Café Parisian with authentic Parisian waiters, said by Don Lynch. Men could retire to their smoking rooms, and women could retire to their reading and writing rooms. They had access to a gymnasium, swimming pool, and had a Turkish bath on board, said by Don Lynch. The first-class suites were by far way more luxurious than those on any other ship. The most lavish of these suites included the 4 parlor suites on board. Each parlor suite included their own sitting room, their own private bath, 2 wardrobe rooms, and 2 bedrooms, said by Don Lynch. Bruce Ismay, president of the White Star Line, occupied one of these parlor rooms with his own private 50-foot promenade. The bathrooms at Titanic were advanced, but many first-class suites still had to share a bathroom, said by Don Lynch. The first class was able to keep themselves in glamorous dining cafes and lounges that were strictly off-limits to second and third class passengers. While the first class was aboard the most luxurious ocean liner in existence, it would not feel that way to third class passengers especially. Second class passengers were accommodated with luxury comparable to first class on other cruise lines. However, there is a stark comparison between the accommodations of the upper 2 class and the accommodations of the lower third class. Although second-class diners had a separate, handsomely decorated dining room which featured long tables and fixed swivel chairs that were common in many first-class cruise lines, they were still served food from the same galley, just without the lavish decorations and dinnerware, said by Don Lynch. Second-class passengers enjoyed a lounge decorated with finely upholstered mahogany and sycamore-paneled walls. The second-class smoking room was furnished to a man's desire, but there was no equivalent room available for women, said by Don Lynch. Although the third-class cabins were in no way extravagant compared to the cabins on the upper decks, accommodations in third class were better than most of the passengers would have known at home. These cabins were located in the lower, less desirable parts of the ship, said by Don Lynch. These passengers ate in a drab, white enamel paneled dining room decorated in White Star Line posters. They shared one general room with pine paneling and sturdy teak furniture, as well as a shared smoking room that lacked the clubroom atmosphere that the upper decks did, said by Don Lynch. Although the journey was luxurious and wonderful, the perfect getaway was quickly transformed in one of the worst tragedies of American history. At the 5th day at sea, Titanic's manufacturing was not sufficient to keep her afloat on the treacherous open waters. At 11:40 a.m., an iceberg was sighted by the lookout on duty. But less than 1 minute later, the Titanic collided with the iceberg, gouging a hole along her side, filling the bow with water, said by Don Lynch. Until recently, the thought was that the filling of the bow with water increased its weight, which caused the stern to rise 45 degrees in the air before snapping in half under the weight of the ship. Recent research shows structural weakness to the ship, particularly the expansion joints along the side of the ship, explained by Coping in 2013. These joints were intended to allow the ship to shift slightly when going through big ocean waves, and it was these joints that caused the ship to snap in half so easily. It is now believed after the bow began to flood, the stern was only 10 degrees above water when the ship split in two, said by Coping in 2013. Not until 12:30 a.m. did word reach third class to begin bringing women and children up the lifeboats, said Dan Lynch. By 1 a.m., only the 5th lifeboat had been lowered into the water, carrying over 40 people. Sometime around 1:40 a.m., Captain Smith called through a megaphone to all the lifeboats to come back to save more passengers. None responded, said Dan Lynch. By 2 a.m., all but 2 lifeboats had been lowered in the water and all the rockets had been fired. On the inside of the Titanic, many passengers waited for immediate death, said by Dan Lynch. At 2:20 a.m., water came crashing through the glass dome ceiling of the first-class stairway. Moments later, the ship was completely submerged, said Dan Lynch. The Titanic took the lives of 1,552 people that night, while only 705 escaped the disaster because of the lifeboats that awaited the Carpathia's rescue, which would arrive just after 4 a.m., said by the sinking of the Titanic. The wreck of the Titanic was devastating for Americans and Europeans. If the expansion joints had held up, allowing the boat to float longer, countless lives could have been saved. During my speech, I talked about the luxuries of the Titanic, the lifestyles of the passengers, as well as the sinking. Thanks for listening.